Hi viewers, and welcome to AAU Talks, where we'll be talking about the database of the African thesis and dissertations. I am Bumi Odufala, and with me is Mr. Abed Corletey, who will be taking us through this discussion. In the last series, we have looked at the general overview of the database of the African thesis and dissertations, and also the policies governing the institutional repositories. So now we will continue with the operational policies, the operational aspects of the institutional repositories. Welcome, Mr. Abed.
Welcome. Thank you so much.
So it's good to have you here once again.
Yeah.
We will be looking at the operational policies. So we can start from here.
Right.
The different policies in the
last time
operational
we talked about the governance policies. I would want to clear some points here on that before I proceed to the operational policies.
That's fine.
You know, the fact that we have separated them into governance policy and operational policies does not necessarily mean that you have two separate documents.
Okay.
It's just one document, but then you have the operational stuff as part of the document.
Okay.
And then the governance policies also as part of the same document. So you are not really having two different or two separate documents. It's still a simple policy guideline for operations of the repository.
Okay.
Now, the operational guidelines would guide you in your day-to-day activities when you are managing the platform. Policies like submission policies, policies like takedown, policies like content, use of data, use of metadata, and a whole lot of other issues. They're all policies that you need to think about. So when we talk about these policies, they are the day-to-day policies that you would normally look at so that it will help you know what to do daily, on a daily basis, the things you need to do.
So can we first look at the contents that these policies cover?
All right. So when we thank you for the question. When we talk about the content policy, we are talking about the type of content there. I want to talk about three levels: the preprints, the postprints, and then the final publisher's copy.
Okay.
So the preprint is normally the first drafts of your research finding. You know, you do your research finding, you do the word processing, and then you will send to the publisher for them to do a review and to give you areas that you need to improve on the report. Okay,
so peer review too is necessary before uploading the content.
Yes, peer review is very necessary.
And so are there other examinations before doing that?
Yeah, the peer review would normally give you the necessary polishing that you need to add up to the paper to make it more of a standard level for people. For publishing. So what you sent to the publisher for the publisher to look at and to do the peer reviewing, that is what is called the preprint.
Okay.
And then the publisher will send back to you the ones with the suggestions on which areas you need to do the corrections. That one is called the postprint.
The postprint.
So and then the final one is the one that the publisher will now put up in his or her, the publisher's final copy. That is how it comes in the journal. Okay, so you have the three. So the content policy, you need to define which of them you are going to allow on the repository. So are you going to allow the preprint? Are you going to allow the postprints? Or you are going to allow the final edition of the publishers? This is something that you need to talk about in your policy definition. So that is one of the areas to look at under content policy.
Okay. So you mentioned something like the final, before the final publishing. Now, after doing the final publishing, is it possible to edit? Does the policy allow editing? And it will not affect what has been submitted already?
Yeah. So that would come to when we talk about other policies on submission. We'll talk about that one as well. Because you have submission policies, you look at some things like the version of the work that you want to put there. If I put the first version out and I come again with the second version, am I allowed to add the second version, or you need to take down the first version, version 1, and then put version 2? or you are going to allow me to have version 1, version 2, if it's up to version 100, all the various versions will be allowed on the platform. That is one of them that we have to look at. Addendums and corrigenda.
Okay.
Those ones, how are you going to handle them? Are you going to allow people to come with addenda? And if somebody comes with an addenda, how do you add it to the work that is already showing? So for instance, if you have a book chapter or have a book and there are some pages that are needed to correct, the book has already been published. It's been published already. So how then do we now add the corrections? The submission policy would need to talk about some of these things to tell you that if somebody brings such an agenda, an addendum or a corrigenda, something to correct some information that's already existing, this is how you handle it. Whether you are going to accept it or you pull down the whole work and take on the new version.
Okay.
You get the point?
Yeah.
All right.
So I want to know, is it the manager of the IR that has every right to do this, to remove or to allow research that will be published?
Okay.
Or it is known to the whole institution before researchers would publish anything, then they can remove it on their own?
Okay. So that is a very good question. So you see, the policy is supposed to be serving as the guideline for doing all these things.
Okay.
So that is why it is important that before you even start the operations, those things are made clearly, they are put down on paper, so that anybody who wants to contribute, you can just come and say, this is our policy. So please get yourself well versed in the policies so that you know what we accept and what we don't accept,
Yes.
what we would allow you to do and what we will not allow you to do. That is why the policies are very important for at this point of starting. You can now clearly define all these things. But then, of course, you know, policies are not cast in stone.
Okay.
So as and when there is a need to modify a certain policy, you would always have the opportunity to do that.
Okay,
But
there
at
is
least
always an opportunity to modify.
yes, modify.
Okay.
But then there's a need for it to be there to begin with, so that you don't go hitting your head against the wall several times.
Sure, sure. So now I can see that we have merged content policies and submission policies.
Yes.
Can we look at preservation policies?
Yes.
How are the repositories preserved?
Yeah. So when we talk about reservation policies, we are looking at things like retention.
Okay.
If I put content on the repository, how long will it be there before I pull it down finally?
It can actually be taken out.
Yes.
Okay.
So is it after 10 years that the research has become sort of not very effective again, not necessary? So we can then put it down, or we are going to allow it to be there. Once it's put online, it is going to be there forever. That is one of the policies we need to look at. Then we need to look at things like with the withdrawal. How would we withdraw something from the content?
Okay.
If somebody comes and says my work is causing a lot of problems for a certain group of people. I did the research on the community, and the research was not very favorable to the community. Now I'm displaying this and everybody in the world is seeing it. So the community is not happy. They have come to me to ask for me to withdraw the work. Should I just go ahead and withdraw?
Okay,
There
or
must
even
be
an
some-
outdated research too
Yes.
could be withdrawn
Good.
from the place.
There must be a way of withdrawing this one and replacing
Yes.
it. That is going to be under the preservation policy. Now, what happens to an item that is withdrawn? If I withdraw an item,
Yes.
how do we handle it? How do we just delete it, or we
Do you
keep
delete it totally?
Good, or we keep it as a record under withdrawn, or how do we handle it in the first place? Then the version control I have already spoken about. Which version? Version 1, version 2, version 3, or we keep all the 3. Then there's closure policy. For instance, if they are all under preservation.
Okay, closure policy
Yes.
too is under preservation.
Yes.
Okay.
For instance, if we had let's say we have a department of electronics, they had their own community, they have their own collection, they had their own content.
Okay.
And now there's another department called the Department of Electrical Department. They also had their collection, they have their content.
Yes.
At a point, the university decided to put the two departments together. So now you have a Department of Electronics and Electricals. What would happen to each of them, their content they had previously?
Oh, okay.
Because now you are closing down the two departments. What about the content they had? Are we going to bundle the content together and put it on the new under the new name, or we retain each of those departments' previous collection and still create a new one. This is something that happens all the time. You know, departments are being merged, departments are being split apart, and all that. So how do we handle all these ones? These are some of the things you need to look at when you are considering the preservation of your content. The preservation
of content. Okay, thank you very much. So our viewers, we have been talking to Mr. Abed Corletey on the operational policies of the institutional repositories. So we will continue in this topic. Always join us and stay tuned. You can join us on the Twitter, on our Twitter accounts, AAU_67, or on Facebook. So thank you, Mr. Abed.
Welcome.
Can we look at other policies?
Yes, there are other policies. For instance, I can talk about copyright issues, copyright and licensing. Okay. You know, there are copyright will normally deal with who owns the work. Who owns the work? So is it the institution that will own the work? But what is more important, that can come under governance issues, where the institution will have a copyright policy, where everybody who does work within the institution, using the institutional facilities, would either have to make the institution a co-author of the work, or if the institution allows each individual to use its own resources, the institution's resources, and still be owner of the work alone. That one will have a general policy by the institution. But then under the repository, there are issues like how can a person use the content? We call them the licensing issues.
Okay.
And there are the 6, we call them Creative Commons licenses. No derivative, no commercialization, attribution, and stuff. That allows you to use a content. To use the content, modify it or not modify it, to sell or not to sell, to attribute to the owner or not to attribute, and to share alike. These are all policies that we can talk about later, because each of them is in depth.
Yes,
if you talk about share alike,
rich, yes,
you share alike, it means that whatever policy or licensing allowed you to use a certain work, if I took your work and you have a policy or licensing on it, the share alike means that when I finish my work, I should attribute the same licensing that you use to allow me to use your work. I should allow others to use the same freedom to use my work. So if you said that I could derive other works from your work and sell, when I finish, I should allow other people to also derive from my work and sell. If you said that I should not take money from your work, it means that when I finish, people should not also take money from my work. So that is one of the copyright issues that you need to look at.
And I believe it also affects journal articles.
It does. Not journal articles alone. It also affects those who submit book chapters.
Book chapters.
Yes. Some people write just chapters of a book, not the whole book. They contribute a chapter to a book.
In essence, we can say that the copyright issues is all about permission.
Permission, yes.
Yes. Permission. If I am permitted to reuse an article, if I am permitted to have access to a research.
That is exactly so.
Okay. I believe there are more policies.
Yes, there are other policies. We can talk about take-down policies. We talked about withdrawing an item. The take-down policies are now specific. So people come with the excuse, or it could be not just an excuse, it could be a genuine concern. So the report is out there, it's been submitted to the repository. Now, how do you trigger the process of taking down some content that is injurious to somebody? A content that is not right. How do you trigger? Is it like you asked earlier? Does the repository manager just get up and say that today I think I read this article, it's not nice, so
then I will remove it.
Would that work? No, there must be a process. There must be, for instance, a team to evaluate whether the claim is true that that content needs to be taken down or not. So that take-down policy must also be clear. Who triggers it? Who is that? And is it the person who submitted the content, or somebody else from outside can come and tell you that this content is not right? Who is allowed to trigger that process? And who are those who are going to be involved in determining whether that process is good, is right,
or not?
Good, right. That is one. Then we can also talk about embargoes. Embargoes, placed on articles so that up to a certain time, when the report has come and it's fresh and it's hot,
yes,
then it says don't show everything. Just show the title, the author's name, and the rest of the content hide. Those have to be determined. And also, it is controlled by the source of funding for that research.
Okay.
A corporate body would come and give you money and say, do this research for me. You have done the research. Then they say that you want to sell the findings to, like, let's take a pharmaceutical company. You have done the research on malaria. You have come with findings. They see that this chemical and that chemical, if you combine it to fight malaria, it's the best option.
Okay.
But that is, they had invested money into that research.
Yes.
So they say, don't give out this result for free. Let us sell to the pharmaceutical industries until we have made back our money. So that's the funder's mandate. So it means that you cannot freely now showcase your research finding.
Okay.
So under that one, you allow the embargo to be placed. So people will read, and then if they want that information, you direct them to the source of the real finding.
And if they are okay with it, then they go ahead.
Good. Now, after some time, you cannot keep it internally also under embargo.
Okay.
So you give yourself time and state, for instance, in your policy that after 6 months, no matter what has happened, you would open it up for people to make use of the resource. So the embargo period will have to be set. How long do we keep embargoes? Which work qualifies to be under embargo? All those things are also important that you have them in place. So that just it's not like anybody gets up and come. It says, I've submitted this content today. Please keep it under embargo for 2 years because I'm going to be selling the content to be making money. That one, we should not accept it. There must be clear the number of months or days that you want to keep, but it must not normally not exceed more than 1 year.
Oh, okay.
It must not exceed. Then there are other people who are also willing to go beyond the thesis or research they have found. They want to write more articles.
Okay.
So if it's, for instance, a thesis, they will say that as this is my thesis, all right, but I want to do more publication out of my thesis. So please, could you keep it under wraps for me until such a time that I have done this A and B and C on the research finding, and then I'll allow you to showcase it.
Okay.
But when it comes to that point, if you have a policy, you can tell the person, our policy states that things under embargo have a time limit of 6 months. So if within 6 months you have not finished with whatever you want to do, we are sorry, it might have to be opened up.
Please, if I may ask, are there general policies, like under this embargo, that involves the continental body, that involves all the institutions and the continent? Do we have some policies like that?
Each individual institution will have to determine what would be qualified for going under embargo.
So we don't have a particular one that's...
General one, no.
Okay.
No. So most of these policies, like we discussed earlier on, are policies that will be determined by the institution itself. That is one of the reasons why, if you remember on the first time we spoke about that, I spoke about the fact that there must be a committee that would oversee the running of the repository.
Yes.
And normally that committee, we would want to have a higher person in authority to be the chairman.
Okay.
And normally we recommend the deputy vice chancellor to be the chairman of the committee. The registrar must have a representative on the committee. The university librarian must have a representative on the committee. The IR manager must be a member of that committee.
Very important.
Then the ICT director must have a representation on the body.
Really?
Yes, ICT director or he himself or herself, whoever it is, must be there, or a higher person from his office to be on the committee. And
they
then
all
within
have to manage it together.
Yes, because it's involving the image of the university.
Sure.
It shows how much research the university is doing, but the way you package it to the outside world would also determine how the outsiders would see the university as a whole. Okay. So that committee would look at most of these things and give approval. You see, because it's a high-level committee, they must think through most of these things because it's going to have a long-time impact on the way the repository will be run.
And please, let me ask too, if there is a violation of all these policies, are there punishments for them?
Yes, that is why the policies are being put there. So you need to have...
Should there be a mistake, what would they do?
You define them in the policy. You see, that's why the policies are being done. You would state clearly also the penalties that come with the violation of these things.
Okay.
You get my point? For
Yes.
instance, if somebody steals, let me see, plagiarism. Somebody steals somebody's work, but the person has finished his work and has submitted. And it is found out later that the work was copied from somebody's work and the person did not attribute.
Okay.
How would the university deal with that work? And how would the university deal with the person who submitted that work? Because now the image of the university has been brought to some level of reproach.
Yeah.
Get the point? But what did the university do to cross-check to make sure that that person did not submit a work that was plagiarized?
Yeah.
So there must be some penalties that are going with the policies, so that people who broach or they break those laws would know that when we do this, these are the penalties that I'll face. They must be stated in the repository, the policy.
In the policies, rather. Okay, so do we have any financial management for
Policy.
the platform itself?
Yes. I think the governance policy must state in a way what sort of financial support they would want to give to the platform. It must be stated clearly. Financial support to either support the acquisition of equipment and its maintenance, or probably to support the staff
and the development also.
Yes. So there must be some statement on the financial implications and how it's going to be handled for. But that must come under the governance policy.
Under governance policy, rather.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So since the operational policy is a day-to-day affair, so I believe if the IR manager is changed or relocated to another department, I hope the policies also allow another person to continue where the other person stopped.
Good.
I hope you are getting me.
Yes, I get the point. So that also is another thing that, for instance, we have not talked about here, but the policy must state clearly. For instance, if the owner, not owner, but the IR manager is being transferred,
the manager, yeah.
What are the things he must hand over?
Okay.
Okay, there must be a handing over note, but what must the handing over note contain? It must be clear on the things that must be handed over to whoever.
So should that be under a policy?
It must be there.
Okay.
It must be there.
Under the governance policy.
Normally there is a need for somebody who is in management position to do a handover.
Yes.
But you must state clearly the things that the person must state in the handing over, so that it doesn't make a general handing over note sort of thing. There might be specific things. For instance, how many servers are there at the time you are handing over?
Okay.
What is the speed that we have for, what's the storage capacity, how things, some specific things that the whoever is taking over will need to know to be able to continue with the operation, so that the person doesn't come and he is lost in the forest because there's no guideline as to what was being done or no information as to what has been done before the person.
Or he will just come and make his own changes.
Yes.
Okay. So thank you very much. Our viewers, on this show, we have been talking about the technical aspects, the operational policies of the institutional repositories. And there are so many things that are entailed in it. The submission policy, the takedown policy, risk management. There are a lot. So you can always go to datad.aau.org. You have more information there. Now, Mr. Corletey, I would want us to wrap up for this segment so that in the next one we will continue. We will take it slowly so that our viewers can understand it better.
Okay.
So do you have anything to tell them?
Yeah. So like I started off, these policies are things that will guide the operation of a repository.
Okay.
You see, it's likely people want to start off and then they would start thinking about the policies. It's like putting up a building first and then asking an architect to now do the plan for you.
Okay.
It's not the best way to go, but a lot of people do it anyway. But it is best to do the plan first.
Okay.
Have the blueprint, have a guideline as to how you do your operations, and then you can start off. So it's just right that you start off with policies in mind, get the policies in place, and like I said earlier, they are not cast in stone. You can decide that every year you would review your policy and change it. And as the conditions and situations change, you would adapt in a way that will make the repository more flexible and allow people to use. The idea is that you are showing your content. You are showing people that you are doing research, and you are using that platform to help you market your institution, market yourself, that is the submitter, and help the scientific world with the knowledge. You are contributing to knowledge. So the policies are just to help guide you so that you don't become like a master of all trades. You are here, you are there, and in the end you are confused. It will just be a formal way of guiding you towards your objective. So it is important that people look at it. And there are a lot of policies around. You can just look at other people's policy, do cut and paste, and polish it up. That's it. And then you have your policy in place. But they are important that people have them to get their operational, to get their institutional repositories operational and in a more guided way of operation.
Okay, and please don't forget to tell them that there's a workshop coming up
yes,
in
there's
Mozambique.
A workshop. Yes. Thank you very much for reminding me. Mozambique from 14th to 16th of May in Mozambique, Maputo. We are going to run the DATAD workshop. Although this is basically geared towards the Portuguese-speaking Africa, we also invite any other person who is interested to attend. Okay. And there will be a lot of things to talk about when we get to the workshop. So I'm inviting all on the continent who are interested, and those outside the continent who are Portuguese-speaking but still want to be part of the DATAD platform to come in there and have a look. Join us for the workshop.
Okay.
Thank you for giving me the platform to market this workshop.
And thank you for coming, for attending our show today. Thank you very much, Mr. Abed Corletey.
Welcome.
Now, our viewers, I hope you have learned so much from this show. So we are encouraging you to participate in the next coming workshop. It will also be in English so that you'll not be lost in Portuguese. So today, we have really talked about the operational policies. And you can always join us on our Twitter to get more information on the database of the African Thesis and Dissertations, and also on blog.aau.org. So always stay tuned. So until next time, I am Bumi Odufala.